to have everybody coming. All right. 117 at the moment. We're still meeting people.
If I'm on the screen, Josephine, that says
Jackie, I have put the new link for the live streaming on the chat box.
Thank you.
You can check it. Yeah.
All right.
It's working now. It's working now.
Is it working now? Okay. Is it different than yesterday?
Yes, because I think the yesterday one is getting trouble. So now it's working with this link.
Oh, it's working with this link now. Okay.
Shall we start?
Yep, I think we can start.
Good idea.
Yep, let's start. And well, welcome everyone. Today we have this wonderful opportunity to link together between the Indonesian Psychological Association and the Australian Psychological Society Perth branch. I would like to welcome everyone. Selamat sore, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Om Swastiastu, and then Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan, dan salam sejahtera buat kita semua yang berada di Indonesia. We would like to welcome you all in this the first webinar, and this would be the first webinar of the 4 webinars that we plan throughout the year 2022. And today webinar is about, we're going to discuss about treatment management for religiously motivated terrorist offender. For the beginning, to introduce who we are and from the APS, I would like to welcome Lydia Genovese to give the greetings.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very, very happy to be here. I don't know whether all of you realize, but when we start something in Australia, we acknowledge the first Australians that came before us. So before we start, may I, on behalf of the Perth branch, and probably there's people from other parts of West Australia, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land. I acknowledge the elders, past, present, and emerging, who have for tens and thousands of years cared for the land and grown the land in spirit. While I'm on the land of the Noongar Wajud people, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands all across our nation. I give my recognition and welcome to all the people from Indonesia. This is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to connect, and we are always very, very happy to be with you and do things together. And thanks for Zora for actually putting this on today. So thank you so very, very much. Over to you, Josephine.
Okay, and next I would like to invite my colleague, my wonderful, my handsome colleague, Hendy Ginting, on behalf of the Indonesian Psychological Association and the president, to share the greetings to all of us.
Thank you, Josephine. Thank you, Lydia, for the wonderful speech, for our collaborations. I will represent Mr. Seger Handoyo as a president of Indonesian Psychological Association. And we are very happy to have this collaboration between APS Perth and Indonesian Psychological Association. And we already start the collaboration 2 years ago, I think, and we have several workshops and also webinars, and we will continue that because it will give us a lot of benefits. Because collaboration is one of the keywords in this digital era. Everything we learn from others and we share. And this year we will have several webinars that we conduct together, and it is very welcome by Indonesian Psychological Association, and we hope that we can share each other to enhance our knowledge and skill in psychology. I think that is all from myself, Josephine. But as a moderator, as a moderator from Indonesian side, I also want to introduce for our colleagues from Australia and also from another country that Indonesia has a vast region, with so many islands, as you know here from the pictures. Thank you, Josephine, for the pictures. And we also have so many ethnics, language, cultures that make it hard to be recognized as a single nation. But we have that symbol of unity in Indonesia, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika. It is unity in diversity. But of course, there will be a lot of struggle to manage, to regulate all of these differences or all of this variety of religion, ethnic, language, and cultures. So it is also have a potential for the topics today. It is terrorism, but I think Zora will explain it very well. So thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the webinar, and I give back the session to Josephine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hendy. That was a very warm welcome from Hendy from the Indonesian Psychological Association. How many psychologists now a member of the Indonesian Psychological Association, Hendy? Do you know?
Well, that's a good question, but I think it is more than 12,000, Josephine.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Right. I think it's about time for us to hear from our speaker, Zora. But before that, shall we have a group photo together? And I'm going to stop sharing for a while to have the group photo. May I actually ask you all to turn on your video, your camera, so then we can have this group photo, even though we're not in the same place, but this is the new normal for all of us. So if you can do that, I really appreciate it. But those who does not give the consent for us to have the group photo, it's okay to turn your camera off. And I would like to ask Joe Norris from the APS to help me in getting the photo of all of us who are attending the webinar today. Probably it will take about 1 minute or so. Thank you. Smile.
Josephine, you might close the share screen to give us a way.
Okay, screen one. Say cheese. 1, 2, 3.
Cheese.
I'm saying cheese, but my screen's still black and I don't want to lose the conversation. So I've clicked on everything I can find, but I'm just going to sit tight. I can see everybody. So thank you.
Screen two.
Yeah, no, I've clicked on everything I can, but it's not coming up. But I'm just going to stay right there. So
ready for screen two? 1, 2, 3. Cheese.
Yes.
And to screen 3. 1, 2, 3. Cheese.
Cheese.
Thank you.
Is that all?
All done.
Okay, that's good. And I would like to say hi to Pak Andi. I can see Pak Andi there. Pak Andi is the Vice President of the Psychological Association. Pak Andi, would you like to say hi?
Hi, everyone from APS.
Hello.
Yes.
Thank you, Chepin. Thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
Yes, and I wish you and the family, healthy. And I hope everyone has already recovered from COVID. Well done.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Well done. All right. Okay. Now I would like to introduce our speaker. Today is Zora Sukapti, and yeah, I'll share my screen again. So I'll be the moderator with Hendy, and our speaker today is Zora Sukapti. She is a forensic psychologist specializing in counterterrorism, deradicalization, and human capital in security system. A senior lecturer on forensic psychology at several universities in Indonesia. She is also the executive office member of the Indonesian Forensic Psychology Association. Expert in counter-violent extremism. This is the first time that I actually heard about this term, Zora, but interesting. And productive researchers publishing many journal articles in a very, very high standard journals. One of her patent work include a 3D model of motivation, ideology, capability, terrorism, risk assessment, and rehabilitation to offenders, which is known as MICRA in Indonesia. She also designed the National Rehabilitation Guidelines for Terrorist Offenders. Has been awarded the Alison Sudrajat Prize from the Australian government for her leadership role. For our Indonesian colleague, Alison Sudrajat Prize is a very, very prestigious prize, and I am so glad that one of the psychologists actually the recipient of Alison Sudrajat Prize. She completed the PhD at Swinburne University of Technology. And her thesis is about motivation, ideology, capability, risk assessment, and treatment management for preventing ideology-based terrorism recidivism in Indonesia in 2020. She completed the Master of Psychology at University of Indonesia, specializing organizational and educational psychology in 2005, and was a Bachelor of Psychology from the University of Indonesia. Her CV is very, very complete and comprehensive, so I would like to invite Zora Sukapti for the webinar with the title Treatment Management for Religiously Motivated Terrorist Offenders. Those who would like to ask questions, you can actually write it in the chat box, and I will from time to time check what questions that you have. And if you would like to also ask the questions personally, you may do so when Zora invites you to do that. Thank you so much, and enjoy the presentation. Here for you, Zora.
Thank you, Josephine. Good afternoon, everyone in Indonesia. Good evening, people from Australia. So we are in the time zone at the moment. So thank you for having me here. I would like to put my gratitude, especially for Indonesian Psychological Association, HIMPSI, and also to Australian Psychological Society, APS, for having me here. It's my pleasure to share my experience and my research regarding CVE. This is the term that is worldwide used by many countries due to its sensitivity. Okay. I would like to share my presentation, which is only, maybe it's about 30 or until 40 minutes. As you know that because the term is so controversial, I mean, terrorism, or people at the, until now still finding the the right term to call this type of violence. If we just let me see, yeah. Okay. Some people, practitioners call it as a counterterrorism, but counterterrorism doesn't explain if it's religiously motivated. Some other practitioners call it as a violent extremism. This is especially introduced by President Obama because at that time maybe the drive is just to make people not feeling like labeled by the terminology, and then some other.
Sorry, Jora, I think your mic is mute. So please you unmute.
Oh,
Yeah, Pak.
is it okay? Thank you for having me here. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, people in Indonesia. Thank you for having me here. Especially, I would like to put my gratitude to HIMPSI and also to APS for inviting me here. It's my pleasure to share my experience and my research in this field. That this, although we know that the term is kind of sensitive, so I would like to explain a little bit about why I choose the terminology religiously motivated terrorist offenders. We know that so many kind of types of terrorism in the world, and this is by theory. There are like 5 kind of terrorist actions. Some is social revolutionary, some is right-wing terrorism, some is nationalist separatist, and the 4th one is religious extremist terrorism, and the 5th is single issue terrorism, like environmental issue. I would like to explain that because in Indonesia, what is trending is the 4th one. Therefore, we focus on the 4th one. If you ask that why not separatists or why not right-wing in Indonesia, we have no right-wing movement. That's why it's like a cancer that if one person have a cancer and then at the same time he has coughing or maybe flu, we focus on the cancer first. So that's why in Indonesia, we focus on the 4th one. But if you ask me, so many terrorism, not why the religious one. In other country, yes, but in Indonesia, it's more of the 4th one. So there are dimensions of terrorism that this is backed by Viktorov. We can see that in terms of actors, there are individual, there are groups, and then in terms of sponsorship, there are state even, and some sub-state and also individual. In terms of authority, we see that there is an anti-state or separatist or pro-state. And then we can see that some of the terrorism is secular and some is religious. And then some willing to do some suicidal movement and some don't. So we can see here that terrorism has so many wide range of dimensions that, but Indonesia, we focus more into the religious one because they are so deadly. As we see that they kill people, a lot of people in Bali and in Marriott, and so that's why we are still put a concern into that kind of terrorism. There are controversy of terminology. For example, some practitioners call it counterterrorism. Some expert practitioners call it as a violent extremism. And this is violent extremism was actually introduced by President Obama. So at that time, it's he wanted to put out the label. That's why it's more neutral. But recently, many of the articles call it as religiously motivated. But as a psychologist, and I'm sure the audience here, many of them are psychologists or the scientists in psychology, we know that actually religion is not a motivation. We know from the Maslow theory that motivation consists of from basic until actualization or transcendence. So there's no religiously motivated. In psychology, this is a term that is more may be rejected, because how come religion become a motivation? Because in Maslow theory, there's no religion. And also, some of the practitioners say to me that religion consists of many parts, like ritual, belief system, and then dogma or doctrine, etc. So it's so broad. Religion consists of maybe economical effort. So to make a religion as a motivation is not really a solid term that can be used. But if we read many articles, many of the scholars use religiously motivated. So this is a term that is not invented by psychologists or psychological association or a society, but we still use it in this webinar, because to meet with people outside the field, psychology field. And also there is another term I use in my PhD, is a ideology-based terrorism. It's mean that it's not labeling to one religion only, but it's basically that terrorism act is actually based on or refer to a certain or a particular ideology, whether it's communism or supremacism or Islamist, or many can be ideology-based terrorism. Based on the research I conduct in 2020, there are 15 aspects in CVE. CVE is the short for counter-violent extremism. CT is the short for counter-terrorism. So these are the 15 aspects in CT or CVE. Policy, and then terrorism prevention, risk assessment, coordination among NGO and government entities, and also prosecution, rehabilitation of offenders and family, recovery of victims, and then treatment management for foreign fighter coming from Syria or coming from Marawi or any other conflicting. And now we are concerned about the militants coming back from Ukraine, because this is happening now. Many of the religious militants now also drag into the conflict, like some other in the area coming to Ukraine to do the fight there. So this become our concern as psychologists, if one day we will treat or rehabilitate them. And then also capacity building for officers, counter narrative in media, maybe like in posters or social media, and then also the use of AI, artificial intelligence, and then terrorism network. We know there were Al-Qaeda, and then ISIS, and then in Indonesia we have MIT, Mujahidin Indonesia Timur. It's not Massachusetts Institute Technology, MIT, and then also we have GAT, JAS, so many. In Philippines, they have Abu Sayyaf, MILF, etc., etc. And then trial process, and we call it CBRN, like chemical, biological, radioactive, nuclear terrorism, and financing. And this is also happening in Indonesia, terrorism financing. So these are the 15 aspects based on the research I conduct, that many practitioners can focus on each aspect, which is usually psychologists focus on the treatment, management, or rehabilitation, and recovery for the victims. We know that before we go into the treatment, we need to know why people do such a thing, like they have religion, but why they do some destructive behaviors? This is because the religion expression are different among people. For example, maybe people in US or maybe even people in Australia, for them, religion is something that's private. If they convert into become Jewish, or they convert into Christian or become Muslim, they maybe prefer to keep it by themselves. But in Indonesia, our expression and religious expression is more public, yeah. And then the conflict begin when two persons having different expression in religious expressions. Like, for example, one person is not satisfied with if the religion is expressed only in the communal or public. They want the nation to be expressing the constitution of a religion that he believe in, for example, like become a Muslim or Islamic State or something like that. So, and the other person wanted to be like in communal or private even. So the core of the conflict, that how far do we express our faith, our religion? Do we have to do the sermon on public, or we just do it in our neighborhood only? Like that this is the problem, the core of the problem that happening. And there are two approaches in viewing terrorism. This is according to Kruglanski, the father of psychology of terrorism. He is we call it the godfather of psychology of terrorism. According to him, there are syndrome approach and also an instrument approach. Syndrome approach means that the terrorism action is driven by some personality traits or motivation nature. This is very clinical. And the other instrument approach is see terrorism actions as only just because of a rational choice, because the actors see it as beneficial. It's not about personality. It's not about we call it in Indonesia pola asuh, nurture or nature. It's about the rational choice. At that time, he see the action as a beneficial to achieve his goal. That's why he do the action. So we see the instrument approach is not the approach that used by clinicians, but the syndrome approach, that's the approach that is used by the clinician. So this is why when I was presenting in the international forum, sometimes non-psychology people ask me that, do you think that this is do we need a clinical psychology to treat the terrorists? And then usually I answer, it depends. If your country or your institution see it as in a way of a syndrome approach, then maybe you need a clinician or a clinical psychologist. But if not, you need maybe social psychologists or people, maybe sociologists, anthropologists, or people in humaniora field. So it's not necessarily have to be clinicians or clinical psychologists. That's why in Indonesia we have two aliran or school of thought that many of our scientists in social psychology do also the intervention to terrorism, because they see it not as a syndrome. Terrorism is not a syndrome problem. It's not about personality. Everyone can do it, either type A or type B, or anyone can do the action if they want. They see it as a beneficial or bring advantage to them. Especially in forensic psychology, we know R&R model, which is to rehabilitate a person. We need to know the risk and need first. This is to avoid the program to be doing trial error, or we call it in Indonesia hit and run, like a 3-day training or 3 days counseling, and then the psychologist gone and maybe come back again another year. That's not effective, because we need to see his risk first and then the need, and then we do responsivity or rehabilitate. In Indonesia, the term responsivity is we don't use responsivity, we use rehabilitation. Some of the agency or kementerian or ministry call it as resocialization, some call it as a reintegration, aftercare, some call it as a deradicalization, some call it as a disengagement. So it's actually in the Western expression, that is a same wine but different bottles. So it's actually the same thing, to rehabilitate, to we call it in Indonesia, to pembinaan, to change the attitude, the behavior, to modify the behavior. But a different administration, presidential administration, sometimes use different term. But in forensic psychology, in the psychology of criminal conduct by Andrew and Bonta, that's called as responsivity. So how we respond to the risk and need. If you ask me that the risky person in terrorism network, for example, is it the one that a recruiter? No, in forensic psychology, the risky person is actually recruiter, can be, or the young vulnerable youth. So risk, the definition of risk here is actually a person that is potentially visited by professionals. Of course, no one will visit your house, for example, because people don't see you as a risky. But we can imagine if someone that is recruiter or a young that is vulnerable planning to go to Ukraine or planning to go to Syria or planning to go to a conflict area, that's risky. FBI, AFP, Densus in our country might want to visit him. That's why it's called risky. I mean, the risky here doesn't necessarily mean that that person is the ideology. I mean, like the highest rank. It can be a person that is maybe unstable or maybe vulnerable, social, having mental maybe issue. So that's why we have to watch or visit him. There are similarity between general and extraordinary crime. So the similarity is both study terrorism or common crime usually involve many multidisciplinary experts or practitioners, criminologists, sociologists come, and then law enforcement, and then legal. They also contribute in the issue. And also both terrorism and general crime are a social construction. It's built from the social construct. And then for both, there are wide discrepancy between formal definition and practical application. The world of criminology, I mean psychology of criminal conduct, what is said in the book, sometimes not happening in the real life. We see that, for example, in theory, that a person having this counseling, and then he will not doing the recidivism, for example. But in reality, it's not far away from the book. For example, we already do all the textbook, but in real life, he's still joining ISIS, for example. So it's happened everywhere that we cannot guarantee that our intervention is success. But there are discrepancy between the books and in real life. And also in terrorism and general crime, usually by research, they are committed by young males. I don't know, maybe you ever read some of the article maybe about why young males do the crime a lot more than senior people. And the fifth, there is a sustained level of terrorism and sustained level of general crime, behavior, destabilization. Yeah, if a neighborhood before there's no fence or anything like that, but then after there's a terrorism or some crime happening in that neighborhood, maybe it will break the social trust in that neighborhood. So everyone start to build fences, for example. That's the impact of crime, whether general or the extraordinary crimes. But in terms of risk assessment, there are difference. Like, for example, like this. Terrorism activities usually constitute multiple crimes because the terrorism actions, they see the trend and they use that trend. For example, some of the a long time ago they use a bomb and then they use a pipe bomb and then car bomb. So it's different. Always elevate or modify their behaviors. And then the response to general criminal offenders, criminal behavior seldom goes beyond local authorities. What happened in Bali bombing, for example, people in Jakarta also fly there to do the intervention. What happened in Mindanao in Philippines, for example, people in Indonesia also planning something in some intervention for people who come back from Syria or from Mindanao. So this is beyond local authorities. And number 3, the offenders of general crime are typically trying to avoid detection. Serial killer, after they kill, they hide. But in terrorism, the offenders usually declare that this is our network, this is our organization, we are responsible for the action. So this is the difference. And also, number 4, the terrorism is typically used as a tool directed wide ranges political goals. So it's not sederhana or simple action. They are linked it to the political goals, like, for example, to build a nation or anything to justify their behavior. Number 5, the terrorist offenders have higher goals, and thus many see them as altruists. That's why in prison, there are caste hierarchy, like a caste in a prison, and usually terrorist offenders are the number 1, the highest rank. They call them ustad, or they call it like a imam. That's and they know they see the terrorist offenders as like altruist, a person who's noble, holy, different than general offenders. Number 6, in terrorism, offenders change their criminal activities over time. They also progressing. They see the momentum. They see some in Indonesia they use a knife. Some they use bomb. Some they use another tools to adjust with the situation. So now we are coming to the risk first before I talk about the intervention or the responsivity. According to my research in Australia, there is 18 risk factors of terrorist offenders. This is different from the general offender. We can see that from 1 until 6 is a motivation, the domain. In psychology, we know it as a cognition, affection, and also psychomotor. In this research, the domain from 1 until 6 is a motivation. We can see it's similar to Maslow. So this is a human before he knows any religion or ideology. Imagine there is an atheist and he is still having a motivation, like economic motivation, sense of justice, fairness, some security motives. That's why they run away to some conflicting area or for example, and social motive, solidarity, sense of belonging. Superiority here is a power motive, and then the number 6 is actualization. So they don't need money, but they just want to actualize their life for a greater good, for a greater goals, but actually is destroying people. Like, for example, some offenders I asked why you joined the ISIS or going to Afghanistan. They said to me that they want to give an impact to the world. So and then we review the economic or anything. They don't have any. They are not living in poverty or something. They just want to actualize. So they don't need some salary or anything from ISIS. But some other offenders said to me that because they told me if I join ISIS, I will get $2,000 per month. So that's we can see that's very economic motive. the number 7 until 12, we can see this is ideology. After the person know about religion, after a person is ejected with religious values, dogma, doctrines. In Islam, we call it takfiri. So takfiri is a ideology that calling everyone kafir, everyone is infidel, no one is good, only my group is good, so everyone is deserve hell, only my group is going to heaven. So that is takfiri. And then attitudes, like never want to see a officer, even never want to see a psychologist, because they see psychologists as the field from the West. And also they see Freud, psychoanalyze Freud as Freudian as like a anti-Islam or something. So because Freud say about libido, about eros, thanatos, etc., ego, superego, blah blah blah. So they see that psychology as a Western or secular field. That's why sometimes when we visit them in prison, they don't want to accept us because of that. And then the target of mission. I mean, the belief about objective. What do you think the meaning of life? What is your purpose in life? Some of the offenders said that my purpose is to have this is a woman. She said that my purpose is to get a wife from Turkey or a wife from Syria. I mean, a husband, a Syrian husband. That's it, the purpose. I mean, some of the offender I asked, my target is to kill a president or to bomb America, Australian embassy, something like that. So this is about the targets of mission, like what their purpose in life. And then layers in the ideological groups, of course, like ideologue, and then panglima or managers, middle managers, and also the technicians or courier or someone that is just to be we call it a peon, like someone that asked to do something. And then militancy, resistance to positive changes, and also understanding on philosophy and context. Number 12, we call it in Indonesia as wawasan kebangsaan, means that what happened in Afghan, what happened in Palestine is different than Australia or different than in Indonesia. Of course, Syria is different than America, Syria is different than Australia. So they need to know the how to differentiate context between countries. And also the last 6 is skills, capability, intelligence, language, ICT, hacking, military skill, social domination skill, and mechanical electric skill. This is the risk. So we can see that the pie, so motivation usually is intervened by psychologists. Ideology usually intervened by clerics, imam, chaplain, in the chapel, or religious leaders. And then in the bottom, the capability is intervened by military. We call it. We have here is Densus or Kopassus, Gultor, anyone that military or law enforcement, because the psychologists don't know the capability. When we do counseling, we don't know that this person is actually good in military skill or intelligence skill or in manipulating, distorting information. In the terrorism network, there is a term called takiyah. Takiyah is how you manipulate the psychologists or officers. So they are they see lying as halal or acceptable because they are dealing with enemies, so they have to lie. That's why if we see the pie, I mean the circle, we know that the psychologists have to work side by side with a legal, maybe from or officers or military. So we know we are not too naive when we go into prison. We need to know other side of the story or the profile from other practitioners. So this is how the configuration in one person, the profile, that we can see that the number 5 is the very high risk, and then number 2 outliner is a more normal. I mean, more lower risk. In 3D dimension, the number 5 in the center is like a U-shaped valley. So I always tell my student that when a person fall into a valley very deep, don't you want to help? My students say, yes, we want to help. That's why we take some rope and then put them step by step to the one level, because that's the illustration that this offenders is so very risky. She was having baby blues. She just got give birth in the prison or something. Gave birth in a hospital, but then the baby and the mother was in a hospital, in the prison, and maybe she had like baby blues or something. So she attacked everyone, including officers and also even the other terrorist prisoners. So this is the ideal before on the left, and then after we do the intervention, the dots go outer the line. So we become, this is the ideal, our goal, that maybe after 5 years intervention, counseling, or psychotherapy, or any rehabilitation, the profile is showing a good result or satisfactory result. Okay, now about the treatment. In my research, when I called or invited practitioners, you can see the experts on 1 until 11. They said that when I asked them the modifiable domains and unmodifiable domains, they answered that motivations and ideology are modifiable. But capability, they said it's hopeless, because once a person can shoot very sharp, very like in military, of course we cannot erase the skill or modify the skill unless the person having a stroke or amnesia or something. So, but this is pretty much the description that there's many experts see ideology is still possible to change. So this answer what the skeptical people say that ideology you cannot change, but actually can, but maybe take longer time. So this is the procedure. Yeah. For example, in the first, this is based on my research about treatment management. Many of the practitioners say that before we do the intervention, we take them, gain their attention. And this is why many of the rehabilitation professionals or practitioners in NGO, for example, they said that I have to have a charm in front of the prisoners, the terrorist prisoners. What kind of charm? Like, for example, I'm from the same school, I'm from their pesantren or the same pesantren as them. So that's to gain attention. And then also some attention gained by saying that I've been there, I was like you, but I'm now here, so I want to help you. So gain attention is it's very important according to my research. And then giving hope. So like you can change, you can get remission, you can change, you cannot be stuck here. We will help you. So they give hope. But be careful about giving hope, because many of the case, sometimes we do a false promise. Like, for example, I see with my own eyes, yeah. The prisoners said that they are disappointed with some NGO or some practitioner. They said that they will buy our product because they do calligraphy. They produce calligraphy, and then some practitioner come to them like a Sinterklaas, like a Santa Claus, saying that I will buy all of your product, but you have to change. And then after they make the product, the practitioner never came back to the prison. So they so disappointed. Be careful, hope, but do not give false hope. I mean, false promise. They are sometimes they are like a little children that when you promise and then you break your promise, they will be more radical or they will be more angrier than before. Rapport, of course, in psychology, we know it as a rapport and then assessment, the risk assessment, and then we set up the objectives of the treatment, and then the methodology, whether we want to maybe together with the clerics or the imams or religious leaders to visit them, etc., etc. So many methods, and it needs art because psychology is an art. So we do the art here. That sometimes I use a movie like watching Kung Fu Panda or doing like a wayang or ketoprak or something like a traditional art or calligraphy. That's art. I mean, depends on the psychologist if he want to design or she want to design something interesting. And then measurement, how you measure it. But in Mikra, in Indonesia, we have the measurement that's within 5 years or 2 years. The goal is different, the dots is different. And then preparation, placement. This is to explain that the person that is a high risk do not combine with the person that is low risk, because you can see that the reputation of prison around the world is become a university of crime. When a person go into prison and then they get out, you hope that they will change, but actually once they're in prison, maybe they learn more in prison. Even the terrorist offender said to me, that the former offender said to me that when I asked them, where was your prison? I mean, where did you detain? They said that I'm from University of Nusa Kambangan. Nusa Kambangan is a place of is a prison, but they call it as a university because in that prison they learn a lot of things before and after. Also well-being, yeah, we care about their, like for example, Indonesia government gives like a housing. This explain why Saudi government, for example, they give like a spa, housing facility, etc., to the offenders. And this is the problem number 10, the well-being. When we give them the facility, don't forget there is another, victim of terrorism. Sometimes in reality, the victims feel jealous, like why the terrorists got everything, got spa, house, even job. We are like this, we don't get those things. And that's not just in Indonesia, in many countries. Heart, yeah, after we have a bonding with them, yeah, heart, and then we do the head, then we talk about the verses in the sacred texts, in the holy books, which hadiths, which verses in holy books that you think that's supporting your your actions. So you see that talking about verses of sacred texts or holy books, it's number 12 after all the assessment and the heart and the well-being are touched. Because if we just visit them, good rapport, and then talking about which hadith or Quran or which verses in Bible that you think that you are eligible to bomb, they will reject because we don't. We haven't win their heart, so we have to win their heart first. Number 11, then we talk about the ideology, the central root. We call it peripheral root and central root. This is the central root. For you, if you ever having psychology periklanan, advertising psychology, we have two methods of advertising. There is a central route, there is a peripheral route. Peripheral is when I sell a shampoo, but I don't tell the brand of the shampoo. But central route is when I really say that use this shampoo. So same as in rehabilitation, when we explain to them, we use peripheral and also and then we talk about ideology, about the verses. That's the central route. And then we combine them with other group, social learning, knowing other outer jihadist people. And then maybe giving them new identity, like you are now a change agent, you are now a champion, you are out from the terrorist network, and then you become a champion now. So we give them a new label, not you are ex-terrorist, but you are now a champion or a winner, change agents, etc. And giving them a new group, maybe a new commitment, yeah, to people. Like for example, in Indonesia, knowing Nahdlatul Ulama or Muhammadiyah groups, so they out from the older circle, and now they join a new circle. And give them empowerment, like social empowerment. If there is a COVID pandemic, I want to do donation, let's join me to do the donation to people, to do vaccine, etc. So we empower them. And then advocacy all the time, maybe until 5 years, 10 years. So this is the hard work of a psychologist, yeah, to always advocate, doing advocacy. And then at the end of evaluation and maybe upgrading, if maybe our rehabilitation process is not perfect, not enough, so we upgrade again next year, maybe changing some element, changing some movies or something that make maybe more effective. This is for high skill former offenders. I mentioned before that there are member of terrorist offenders that is very high skill, like for example hackers, or they can do a chemical weapon, so they can do a military shooting skill, etc., etc. Actually, the process is similar, but there is a channeling. You can see from the hand. Yeah, we do the channeling. Like for example, we give them opportunity to teach. Like for example, if they are good in English, or they are good in Mandarin, or they are good in Arabic, maybe channeling the skill into like teaching officers or teaching Kopassus or Densus how to do the biological weapon, because we want to know how you do it, like, or maybe teaching the people about IT, about how you hacking the computer, etc., etc. So if they are misuse our facility when teaching, we give reward and sanction number 12. Yeah, we do some like a stick and carrot, like punishment, like, oh, I give you trust to teach officer, and why you join your group again, so we give some sanction, or maybe give rewards like a salary or something. So this is for high skill former offenders. This is general competencies for rehabilitation professionals based on my study, and it just released this month. The psychologists or therapists or staff need to have a self-management, because this field is so dangerous. So you need to have a control. Like for example, after you do the rehabilitation, you cannot post it on media or something. You cannot do showing off to people that, hey, I just did the rehabilitation, to ISIS member, blah blah blah, and then to showing the photo. So to for example, to people, why? Because self-management is important, because the issue is so dangerous and sensitive. So we, the psychologists or the therapists, need to also to manage our urge to, narcissistic or showing off urge, yeah, to the RAM, you have a break on, to regulate yourself, because this is for your own safety, not putting your child or anything in a social media picture, etc., etc., because people know that you are rehabilitating terrorist members. So there are so many spies and etc. So you have to be careful not to be like every time you go here posting, every time your child and you posting. So it's not recommended. And then also problem approaching competencies, that you are good in approaching the problem when during discussion. If you got threat, for example, you have to know how to deal with it. And also human approaching competencies, how to approach the terrorists, different religion, maybe we are now dealing with a white supremacist, so we have to know about how to deal with him, how to connect with him, so something like that. And then positive transformation competency. In Indonesia, we call it charisma. Charisma is a positive transformation competency is like, you know, some people when visiting someone and then the other people want to follow, like, so there is a charisma that making him followed or by the prisoners. So some of the NGO leaders in Indonesia are like that. They have a charisma that when they visit prison, the ISIS member, GI member, Al Qaeda member want to follow him, like, yeah, that kind of thing. I don't, in English, I don't know, but in my research, it's called positive transformation competency. And this is the 9th specific one. So this is the general, and this is the specific competencies, economic competencies, legal competencies. The practitioners don't have to have all these, but this is mandatory, and this is not mandatory. So we can see this is the checklist. Like, for example, in domain of motivation, if we want to teach them how to be an entrepreneur or successful in making business, startup business, then we have to have an economic skill. We have to know about how to set up the startup business, how to advertise our product, etc. So number one, we can see here, there is a checklist. And this is, we can see that in the last skill, mechanical electrical competency is for officer. If they want to rehabilitate together with the psychologist, the law enforcement or the military need to have a mechanical electrical skill. So it's not, so he's not being manipulated or fooled by the client of the offenders. This is the general qualities: calm, smart, be wise, genuine, patient, humble, adaptable, careful, committed, dedicated. Why committed, dedicated? Because sometimes this is drain your energy, talking about verses for hours, talking about how they kill or cut someone's head, for example. That can drain your energy. That's why the dedication is needed here, and commitment. And content, charismatic, empathetic, trustworthy, ethical. Why number 23 ethical? This is according to the practitioners I interviewed. They said that some of the practitioners, I'm not talking about psychologists, I'm talking about practitioners in CVE. Sometimes after they success in the rehabilitating of offenders, they are showing off the offenders in media. Like, for example, this is my product, this is an ex-terrorist, he's good, etc., etc. So that's not recommended, because you glorify yourself by putting him in trouble. If he's exposed and he will be intimidated or maybe threatened by his group, that's unethical. That's for. But I'm sure, I trust that psychologists will not do that. But because this is the field of many, not just psychologists involved, then ethical should be underlined, yeah, because I'm sure that psychologists have like a sumpah or a promise ethical code of conduct. So maybe this is for outside psychology field. Okay, this is it. Thank you so much for having me here. I give it again to Josephine.
Thank you. I think it's such a impressive sort of presentation. What about, what do you all guys think about, Zora's presentation? Interesting. I learned a lot today. And I guess, like we all learn today that, it's not easy to implement psychological theory or, our expertise in this new area. So if you want to have, if you want to ask Zora any questions, please use this moment, because, it's very rare and it's very difficult to get Zora to come and become our first presenters today. And yeah, anyone would like to ask questions? Oh, there is one question in the chat box, Zora. I'll read through. My name is Fitri from HIMPSI. I would like to ask about, in the general process of treatment management, what kind of assessment tools that you use often to get the clarity of the prisoner's profile, and how do you assess whether they're lying or not?
It's a good question. So far, I use Micra, my assessment tools that I invented with the professors in Australia. But sometimes I combine it with other, like when I'm in the team of a psychologist, sometimes I combine it, people in the clinical psychologists combine it with MMPI, etc., to make the data more rich. And also, because they like to lie, yeah, that's a good question. We combine with behavior checklist for, we also doing interview with officers, because if the prisoner, for example, say that I'm not good in hacking, but then if I ask the officers, no, he lie, he's good in hacking, we have the proof, then we can cross-check doing validation, verification, and triangulation about the data.
Okay, yes, next questions. I would like to understand further on how to advocate in long period of time, because as part of therapy effectiveness, it should be done within certain short period of time.
Some practitioners believe that 2 years, not joining any activity in the group, that's can be a sign. So doing advocacy, many people suggest 2 years, 2 years advocacy, and make sure that the person is not joining or having communication or anything activity together with the former members of the group.
So 2 years of remission, is it?
Yeah. Yeah. The problem is the budget by the officers or the agency that hiring the psychologists.
Depend on how long the sentence for the terrorists. If it's a life sentence, and how long would need to treat the client. That's also a good sort of questions. Okay. Next would be, do you treat the patient's trauma in depth as part of their rehabilitation?
Yeah, it's a good question. Usually, as of today, the trauma is applied for children under 18 years old. So at the same time doing the risk assessment, usually we, the psychologists in Indonesia, also are assessing the trauma, because that's considered as still a child, 18 years old, under 18 years old. But for the adult, because at the moment we are focusing on the risk, that's kind of missing in our program. We don't do, I mean, maybe in the future, but at the moment, because there is banyak permintaan, so many requests about the assessment, so we only do the risk and the need, but the trauma, that's usually beyond, unless it's a children coming from Syria or coming from Afghanistan.
So there is this criteria when the trauma management is going to be implemented. At the moment in Indonesia, it's only if the victim or is actually under 18. But it's still something that is needed in the future.
Yeah.
Agree with that? Okay. So yes, another, thank you, very interesting and so nice to have international. Oh, okay. It's a compliment from our participant, and it is. Can you please tell us more about specific intervention use and what is particularly effective in terms of addressing cognition of beliefs?
It's a good question. Yeah, sometimes we, this is my experience. Yeah, sometimes I invite them, join them to the visiting elderly. That's one of the example. That's I do the art, yeah, because they are very physical. In psychology we have a person, a type of person that is like limited in experience in paper and pencil. So they are very limited in paper and pencil experience. So they are more like when they're angry, they just want to punch the wall and throw away the the chair, for example. So in this kind of with this kind of person, the Afghanistan combatant, I invite 25 of them to visit elderly, and this elderly is so in a very in a humble situation, humble condition. And at first they don't want to talk to them, and then after 4 hours they collide, blended, and then when they say goodbye, they cry each other. And then one of the terrorist offenders said to me, "Miss Zora, thank you so much for bringing me here. We don't know, we always talk about war, but we don't know that one day we will be old and we will pee in our pants, etc., etc." So they become, so I don't talk much because they don't talk to women, because they are men, and in society, that male dominated society, sometimes they see women as you cannot talk like directly like that. So being a psychologist, we can be di belakang layar or behind the stage, and we merangkai to assemble, design something. One of the program also, I reconciliate them with the victims. So 50 of offenders, 50 of a victim, they talk, dialogue, and then they cry, and then the offenders say, "I'm sorry on the behalf of my friend who bombing Marriott, and I feel sorry. And then if you need our help, we are ready to help you." So it's become, so that's kind of a example of a program, cognition and affection.
Amazing. I think I'm going to offer, like if anyone wants to directly ask Zora, before I read the next question. So if anyone wants to discuss interactively with Zora, please do so.
We might ask Situ, Josephine.
Situ.
Because it's a good question. I mean, I think anything about the childhood life of terrorists. Please, Situ, do you want to ask this question, or is it just a comment?
You mute again.
Unmute.
Could you
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, okay. It's good now.
Just a general question, because it's pretty common psychologists tend to ask their client about their childhood life. So is there any trend, any particular childhood life that they were brought up?
It's interesting that many of the offenders I assess, many of them have a broken home or violence introduced in the early childhood. Like, for example, in their school, like when they maybe doing the ritual, they use some, hitting, etc. in the family, and also broken home. Many of the offenders' fathers gone away. That's why many of the some experts believe that this is a father figure issue. Some like for example, one of the bomber in Aleppo, which is from Indonesia, his father left when he was small, and so many like that. And then his mom have to struggle, and then when he bombed himself in Iraq, Aleppo, he said that this is I mempersembahkan, I give this bombing to my mom to grant my mom heaven. So and also the case of Abu Bakar Bashir is interesting. Abu Bakar Bashir is around 70. He's the leader of GI. When we assess, he never, from zero childhood until now, he never have one single person, a friend that is non-Muslim. You can imagine a person that is grow up without knowing other believer. So of course there will be intolerance, etc., because he never see the other side of other people. This is also answering the prejudice. There is a question about prejudice. So so they have a lot of prejudice because they never know the non-Muslims. That's why in our program sometimes we invite also priests, bhikkhu, or the Buddhist monk to talk and to visit them, to give them some present, etc. So they know that the non-Muslims are nice. It's not like what they describe, like that.
Interesting. Yeah. Anyone else want to ask Zora directly? Lydia?
One question. It's very interesting because we now see more and more hundreds and perhaps even thousands of young people who have become refugees. Now, where would they leave? It's a very dangerous area. And thousands of young people who have become homeless, parentless, orphans, everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And also in Al-Hol in Syria, I sometimes got some pictures in the camp. Yeah, they are the situation is really really bad. So they think that they're full of anger. That's why our officer, law enforcement, is not even there. Different than in Australia. In Australia, the mom, the woman, and the wife and the kids still go home to Australia from Syria. But in Indonesia, we are really really careful. And a year ago, Mr. Yusuf Kala announced that only below 10 years old can go home because the amount of Indonesians in the camp and in the become a refugee is a really really significant compared to maybe in Australia only some other kids, but in Indonesia so many, like maybe 200 or some. So we are one of the suggestion is putting these kids to Nahdlatul Ulama school, so the moderate. But still, in forensic approach, we always assess the risk first because we cannot combine them with the regular kid because this kid is ever see a blood, playing sport with a human head, etc. So it says, of course, we have to be careful.
thank you.
Thank you.
Is Lydia, are you actually asking questions?
Your microphone is off.
Microphone is off.
Sorry. Yeah, didn't see that. Yeah, I would just wanted to ask you a question, Zora. To me, these kids, these people that, join the religious terrorism, it's a great sense of belonging when they join a group. So what then happens when you treat these people and they don't have this group to belong to? What happens? Because this is from what you're describing, most of these people really have grown up in a very dysfunctional kind of home and there was little attachment. So they join this. And look, I've seen it in other areas in Australia, like young people who come from very dysfunctional families that, for instance, wanted to join the army or the police force. And I used to say to them, you can't even keep school rules. How you join this organization? There's so many rules. But what I noticed, of course, all of these people, they wear a uniform and there is this very important sense of belonging. And I would imagine that probably this is what attracts a lot of these young people from dysfunctional family where they don't belong to anything. They're not connected well, but they connect to these like-minded people who are angry at the world because they didn't get their needs met as human beings. And so they connect together and then we treat them. And what happens after the treatment? They don't have this group to belong to.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Especially in the Western or in Australia or in the America, there is a trend that the one they're joining is actually the third generation of immigrants, because the first immigrants feel grateful after they hit Australia. The second still grateful, but the third one is lost because they cannot speak Jordan, but their physical is like Jordanese, Lebanese. So they are in the between the culture. So they are a lost generation that they don't belong to. They see themselves as American citizen, but the physical is not like blonde or something like that. So they have a crisis. That's the first. But in Indonesia, because we have no case of immigration, like a Turkey immigrant. Sometimes after the intervention, we really ask like a agent, like a club, to like we call it like a kakak asuh. Kakak asuh is like a brother sister. What is it? Yeah, Josephine in English. Kakak asuh is like a.
It's like foster brother.
Yeah. So to join, so they have like a kakak asuh or a brotherhood sense, like for example joining Muhammadiyah or Nahdlatul Ulama Brotherhood, something like that. So now they one interesting is that many of them, the young ISIS now having yayasan or foundation. They built a foundation, and they are like the ex-ISIS that go together, that not ISIS anymore. So they make their own foundation and group. This is also happening. And also the ex-combatant, the Jamaah Islamiyah, they make their own foundation and they name it as Akhlakul Karimah. Akhlakul Karimah means like a person that's a noble. So it's a noble peace, something like that. So we give them a new purpose, a new group.
In fact, they belong to another group, which now is not a terrorist group, but the belonging happens, which is great in a way, because if you take away what's really, important to these people and what makes them feel good, that belonging, and you don't substitute it with something else, I would imagine that many of them would go back.
Yeah. One time, what time happened when I visited and doing counseling to one the leader, and then the other, it's a young. It's not he was not a prisoner, but he always visit prison. I asked one of my staff that is he a prisoner? No, he's just visited the prison because his leader is there. And then I said that, can I give him like offering him like a scholarship or something, like together with the Ministry of Religious Affairs. And then my staff warned me, said that no, do not even approach to that young man. I said, why? Because he belonged to like a godfather in ISIS. So if I, like it's a matter of fighting over a soul.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good, Zora. Zora, I would like to actually address some people from our live streaming YouTube. They also ask questions. Okay, one question would be, what are the basic things to do in dealing with terrorists in Indonesia?
I think the basic thing is we believe address the well-being first. I mean, many of them having poverty and everything. I mean, like different than the people in America joining ISIS, they have an income, etc. But in Indonesia, many of the motive is still economic. So we have to address that first, and then if they are ready, then we talk about verses because we cannot just jump into verses and their stomach still hungry.
Okay. And the second question. Oh, sorry, Lydia, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just said you look after that basic survival first.
Yeah.
Give what they need rather than, what they want later on, but give what they need. And I can understand that. But in a way, it's not much different from anywhere else.
Yeah.
Because it ends up with needs that these kids or whatever are not getting their needs met in an appropriate way.
Yeah, that's agree. Right, the next questions would be, what is the recidivism rate for terrorists released in Indonesia? In the UK, many serious attacks have been committed by people already released from prison for prior terrorist conviction.
Good question. That's in another research I did in 2017, which is 5%. So 5% is that the one that is in prison do it again. Well, according to people here, I mean, the law enforcement 5% is still low, but still 0 until 5. I mean, if because in terrorism, one action is so deadly, right? So even 5% is, according to some people, is not enough. Have to be 0%.
Okay. Right. If you still have any more questions, I think we still have some questions in the chat box, but I'm aware about, some people want to have a prayer in Indonesia. So I'm aware about that. But if one last questions, probably, interactively from Indonesia side, is there anyone wants to ask questions to Zora?
Maybe Abigail, yeah. How many subjects are your research? Well, before my PhD, I did like 60 cases per year. But after my PhD, after Australia, I'm more into academic. I'm doing research. I don't do the one cases by case. I mean, usually I do research and about women and children. They are more, well, about, this is interesting about women, because they see that women is more passive, submissive. Actually, many of the women also become like a godmother, but they are like latent, like a subtle. So they give blessing to the people to do the action. So they don't do the action, but they are inbreeding. I mean, they are developing, they teaching the ideology, but they don't do action. So this is what's the difficulty about women. Some of the women in Indonesia is because they come from some island that is culturally is dominating. Like for example, in Jawa Barat, in West Java, women are more dominant by research. Yeah. So we can talk to the women, but in the Solo, for example, or in the Central Java, the women is more submissive. So we do another route for intervene the woman, because they are very patriarchal culture. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And I think there is one question that really wants to ask about the risk assessment tool. What kind of risk assessment tool that you're using?
Yeah, Mitra. That's I use.
Mitra. And Zora, do you mind to actually share your journal publication? And I think, Pak Hendy, you actually have that publication.
The link for Zora's doctoral thesis dissertation.
Yep. Yep. Do you mind to actually put it in the chat box so then everyone can actually download? Would it be okay with you, Zora?
Yeah, no problem. It's open source.
Right. So I have already uploaded the Zora slide presentation. So if for anyone wants to download Zora's presentation, can you please do so before leaving the Zoom? Because I'm not actually going to send to all the 500 people, because I'm not very sure who's actually coming. And then also we would like to have your feedback because it's so important for us to know what actually you think about today's webinar, whether you actually learn something new. I definitely learned something new. And then, and probably have other sort of suggestions for our next webinar. So please go and submit your feedback. It's an interesting 1.5 hours that we've learned today. And Pak Hendy, would you like to say anything else? Interesting.
Yeah, just short. So thank you very much for everyone who attending this webinar, especially Zora, for sharing a very wonderful research finding and also experience. And we hope we can do it again, with APS. Thank you, Lydia, and our friend from Australian side. I think this is not just a sharing, but we are also, interact each other and cross-culturally might have a more close relationship. So we should do it again. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. And can we all give round of applause to Zora by giving that raise? And yeah, thank you, Zora. You're wonderful.
Zora,
Thank
we
you
would
so
like
much.
you to go to Russia now and do something about that big, terrorist that is terrorizing the whole world.
They call it a new vacuum cleaner now. So everyone is going there now.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So interesting that we
Thank
have.
you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
interesting that we have this topic, and then this is happening, and then kind of like like a calling to all of us that this is not something that we should neglect. The topic. We cannot avoid learning this topic, even though it's probably like quite scary for some people who are not actually dealing with terrorism. But yeah, we're so lucky to have you, Zora. Thank you so very much for all attendant. And again, I am still going to stay in the Zoom meeting for a few more minutes for those who are still downloading the file, and for those who are still sending their feedback. And thank you so very much for joining us. And I would like to actually also let you know we're going to have a next webinar on the 30th of May, 2022. And the topic is about Berlian. So this is from the Indonesian side. What are we going to have next would be Berlian. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about that. Right, that's the 30th of May, 2022. Stay tuned, and then we will let you know, the registration, and we would like you to participate again in our second webinar. Thank you very much, and salam untuk kita semua. Semoga kita semua sehat selalu, dan jangan lupa terus berusaha bahwa kita antara dua negara ini terus bersahabat dan terus bisa membina network yang lebih kuat di kemudian hari. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josephine. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.